Hello and welcome to Neuro Nomads. We are two moms that are expats and are raising neurodiverse children, and sometimes a bit neurodiverse ourselves as well. And today our podcast is going to be about, we're going to do a bit of a continuation of last episode where we were talking about getting a diagnosis and our feelings about getting a formal diagnosis for our children. So we're going to continue with that, and then we're going to move on to now what? Do we tell our children? How do we tell our children? Like at what age? And like, how do you tell your child that they are neurodiverse or that they are autistic or ADHD or et cetera, et cetera? And so I know that you've had some recent diagnosis. So let's start with you because it's fresh in your mind. So you knew that your kids are neurodiverse and you had previous diagnosis for older son, but you've recently gone and got the official diagnosis so that you can put specific strategies in place. And you can't do that without getting specific diagnosis. So I know you've just done that. And I failed to mention that my name is Dallia. and you're Krista.
That's okay. Thanks, Dahlia. Yes, my name's Krista. I'm coming to you from Florida, the USA, and Dahlia's coming to you from Abu Dhabi, which is just such a fun word to say.
Abu Dhabi.
Me and the kids are always like, Abu Dhabi, Abu Dhabi. It's a fun word.
It's a fun word. And it's even more funner to live here.
Yeah. And you just imagine like a magic carpet. Abu
Yes.
Dhabi. Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah. Dallia and I it's Monday morning, and Dallia and I are both quite exhausted from our fun weekends we've had. So
Yeah.
mind the groggy Monday morning, Dallia and
Monday
Krista.
evening for me.
Oh yeah, Monday evening for you. Yeah. And I just got up. So yes. So I had received a diagnosis for my oldest many, many years ago now. And when my other ones came along, as we've discussed in prior episodes, I could tell that they were neurodivergent, but I didn't go forward and get a diagnosis because the expense of it, basically. And they were doing okay in school. I was modifying things at home already just because of my past experience with my oldest and the information that I had around autism through raising him. And then when my other two started struggling, I was like, oh, this is seeming very familiar. And I think with diagnosis, for me, as if it doesn't really benefit the child like in an educational way, or any other way with resources or getting help for them, then to me, I was thinking like, why bother getting them diagnosed? Like it's going to be so much money. I think in Canada, it's about 6,000 a child. And in the UK, you paid for one of yours to get diagnosed. And I think it was like around 5,000 pounds or something like that. Wasn't it in the end?
I think, I can't remember now, but I think the one appointment was like £800. Another appointment was £2,000. And probably another one was about £1,000 or something like this. So yeah, we're looking at about between £3,000 and £5,000 to get a private diagnosis. But in both Canada and England, you can get government in England, NHS or government medical diagnosis, but it's normally like a 2 to 5 year waiting list.
Yeah. And I had my oldest on that waiting list, and we waited 2 years, and it was the team that diagnosed him was really, really not thorough. And they were like, oh, we don't know. We're not sure. It's on the line. So we're not going to give him the diagnosis. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like he so clearly has. And so then we prayed for a private, and we ended up getting a diagnosis because they were you're paying for a service and they're much more thorough, and they're doing a very, very thorough job. So I've had both of those experiences. But anyways, when we moved here, one of the amazing benefits I think I've said is that we have like fantastic medical coverage. And so my husband and I discussed, and we thought, it would be so beneficial at this point for the kids to get proper diagnosis because we're going into a new school. It's not as accommodating as the last school we were in, unless you have a piece of paper that says this is why your child needs help, extra help. So we got both two boys assessed. We weren't really, I'm pretty sure about both of them, but one for sure I was very confident that he definitely was on the spectrum. And yes, so we had them assessed, and it was really a positive experience. It was a team of two people, a husband and a wife, and they very well known in the area. We did a lot of research too to make sure like that the doctor we were going to was recommended in the community, and just wanting to make sure that we were going to be comfortable with who was going to be spending time with our kids, who was going to be assessing them. We wanted to make sure that they were like, someone that we could work with. And yes, so we asked around a lot about who we should go to, like in the local community, before we picked the assessor. And he was really wonderful. And so we did receive a couple diagnoses for each child, and they're both diagnosed autistic. So that was confirming to me. And then there was some other diagnoses around mood and ADHD and some learning challenges, specific learning disabilities, because he did like an IQ test with them, which was awesome. Looking at their math and writing and reading and spelling and all these different, putting blocks together, seeing how the patterns are, seeing if they excel in some areas, like if they're savant, like your child, Dallia, like in maths or things like that, or if they have a deficit, which is so beneficial for the schools to have that, and for you as a parent to know, what should your expectation level be with your child's grades, and how you can give them extra tutoring or support. So that was awesome to know. So I was telling Dallia so it was just actually last week we got the official diagnosis, and I was feeling strong going in. But when face to face with the doctor and kind of saying to you, like, this is how your child struggles, this is what's going on for them, I thought I was going to cry, honestly, like in the office, because as much as I know that being neurodiverse is a gift, and there are awesome gifts that come along with having that, I do know that the world is not set up so much for kids with neurodiversities.
It's
Not even,
emotional.
not even so much neurodiversities, but it was the learning challenges piece that comes
Mhm.
alongside oftentimes.
Yeah.
Like when son was diagnosed dyslexic, which I totally knew, because I had him looked at as speech and language pathologist already. But just to have the confirmation again, I don't know. I was really emotional about it. And I just felt like I needed to take time to process that, like myself, and just like grieve, as we had talked about in the prior episodes, let go of the expectations. And because when your child comes to look at you and you have to help them, and they're crying and they're saying, like, I'm just not getting this, math work or whatever it is, and they're feeling frustrated because other kids in the school are like in their class are seeming to get this way quicker than they are. And you can tell like it's doing a number on their self-confidence. You have to have like yourself at a place of peace about it, so that you can reflect back hope to them and positivity, and help them to move through their own emotions, rather than having your own emotions about it at that time. So if that makes sense, I don't know if that makes sense,
No,
but
absolutely. And I think you grieve for, not grieve, but you get emotional because you know the struggles they're going to go through life, and you're getting
yeah,
confirmation that these are their struggles, and
yeah,
it's an uphill battle all the way. Making them feel good about themselves is going to be a real struggle, so
yeah,
much more than neurotypical children that you're just dealing with normal everyday ups and downs of life. And you know that as a family it's a much bigger struggle, and you're getting
yeah,
confirmation of that when you get a diagnosis.
yeah. No, you're 100% right. And I think, like, even though I know and I've looked at the research, your mind still goes through all those things. Like, I was like, oh, like, could I have caused this somehow? Like, I'm like, how can three of my children have this? Like, three out of the four, my
Genetic.
yes, but I'm just thinking to myself, like, did I even though I know I didn't, like, the thought, like, passes through, right? Because
All of us.
you almost want to look like somewhere to blame, like,
Mhm.
for the struggles that they may encounter. Because every mom and parent wants their child to have a happy life and to feel confident and to not have to have struggles. And on the other hand, as I was processing it, I was flipping it over to the other side and thinking about resiliency. And I was kind of, Dahlia and I chat on Marco Polo a bit, and I was like talking to her about the resiliency piece that can come along with when you have these challenges to overcome in your life. You can become a stronger person when everything doesn't come super easy to you. You can become a resilient person. It can develop like this tenacity within you that can carry you sometimes even farther than somebody who had everything just handed to them super
Absolutely.
easily. Yeah, so
Sometimes,
that's
uh,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
Sometimes gifted children burn out, or not burn out per se, but everything's so easy for them school wise that as soon
Yeah,
as they hit a struggle, and especially with autistic children with savantism or whatever you want to call it, um, they have this perfection that if they're not going to get 100%, they don't even try. So
yeah,
they go through school, it's easy, easy, easy. And then they hit a roadblock in their life that's not easy, and they just don't have that resilience. Where you
yeah.
have people that struggle their whole life, you know that they're going to deal with the bumps in the that get thrown at them in the future.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. So I've just been processing this past week, even though, like I said, I've known for many years that they're most likely on the spectrum. Like I was almost 100% about it in my mind, and my husband felt the same. And everyone who met them kind of, like people who know when you know, right? Um, but to me too, because of the mental health piece that comes along with diagnosis, like oftentimes there's can be like OCD, there can be like a mood disorder where, I think like the kind of depressive kind of pieces to their,
Anxiety,
yes, oh, my
super
little,
anxiety.
yeah, yeah. So that was hard for me to hear too, because it's one thing to struggle with autism, um, and neurodiversity is kind of like, have those challenges in life and learn to overcome them. But then it's another thing if there's like when the mood pieces are there, and especially, when they come out in the teenage years, like because children, we should do an episode on teens with on the spectrum, because it's like when they're yeah, we both are going through that right now, and
Yeah.
I've been through it with my oldest, but like it's very different how a child with on the spectrum goes through puberty, right?
Mhm.
And those milestones in those puberty years, it really can be challenging, and you have to kind of like gear yourself up for like proper expectations around their behavior. When you meet other moms and they're like, oh yeah, my kid's like thriving, they're getting their driver's license, they're getting their job, they're thinking, this or that or whatever, and you're just kind of like, oh, my kid
No.
won't have a shower
Yeah.
still. Like it's just
Oh, my
like,
kid showered this week.
yeah, 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 exactly. Oh,
But
anyways, what have
so,
you found with that, Delia? I have to
um,
fix my mic.
okay. So I'll talk while you're fixing your mic.
Okay,
Um,
sounds good.
so the oldest one, we got diagnosed a couple of times with ADHD. And as I said in one of our earlier podcasts, when he was diagnosed, I didn't identify with being a neurodiverse family. And I certainly didn't identify with myself being neurodiverse at all. And then when my youngest one was diagnosed, I kept on realizing that my middle one is definitely autistic without, having to get a diagnosis for him. But now that puts us in a position where my youngest one has a diagnosis, and my oldest one, my middle one, doesn't have a diagnosis, but is most definitely autistic. So
Yeah.
now I have to advocate for him at school without a diagnosis. And that is tougher.
Mm.
So definitely. So I wonder, and he's going into RB next year, 11th and 12th grade. And he most definitely has dysgraphia. He finds it really difficult to write. And ever since he was little and learning to write, we've had these conversations with teachers saying he's not doing his work, and he's naughty and he's not
Yeah.
doing this and he's not doing that. It's because it's painful for him.
So can you tell me what, just for our listeners, like what is dysgraphia?
Dysgraphia.
And
I,
yeah,
I I don't know exactly. I don't know what the
that's okay. Just what do you
definition
know
of it
about it?
in the
Mhm.
dictionary is, but it's definitely a fine motor skill problem with your
Yeah.
hand, where writing is painful
Yeah.
and not, it's really difficult. But
Hard to tie shoelaces,
yeah, exactly, fine
do
motor skill
buttons
problem.
up,
Exactly, and
fine
so
motor skill. Yeah.
fine motor
Holding a
skill.
fork properly,
Yes,
holding, yeah, all of
absolutely.
that.
And so now with the RB, the school is kind of giving him accommodations. He gets 100% for everything anyway, if it's on the computer. But subjects like English and social studies and things like that, that you have to write big, long
Yeah.
essays, his marks do come down because it takes him that much longer to write his thoughts down on paper and organize himself on paper. So, but apparently the RB is old school and there's a lot of writing, and I have to get him a diagnosis if I want to
Oh,
get him accommodations to write RB exams. So
okay.
now I'm thinking, obviously I've always focused on my youngest because he's got the learning difficulties. So,
Hmm.
we try, what are his difficulties, which led to the autism diagnosis? What are his difficulties so that we can get accommodations for him?
Yeah.
But I've never had to really think about getting a diagnosis for my middle one. But now,
Right.
going into his RB years, I want him to be able to go into exams with an accommodation of typing on his computer so that he can go and get the best marks that's in his brain rather than struggling with the writing portion. So
Okay.
I'm looking at that. And
Okay.
I know the backlash we got when my youngest was diagnosed autistic, with the
Hmm.
school and them saying they can't support him, etc., etc. The backlash from all of that, when we arrived here, and I wanted to get accommodations for my older one, but I had to get a new diagnosis for his ADHD to get access to longer exam time, etc., longer time to hand in assignments, etc. He was very, very reluctant to go and get diagnosed again because my other two are definitely autistic. I think maybe he thought he would maybe get diagnosed autistic as well. And also because of the backlash of what happened with the autism diagnosis for my youngest, he kind of felt like, I don't want to have that stigma
Yeah,
and
there
I
was
don't want
like a
to do that.
stigma there
So
of,
it
and he was,
really,
yeah,
it was a battle with him to go. And
yeah,
eventually we did go, just specifically to get access to a medication. He's 18. So
yeah.
I wanted the extra time. He gets extra 25% time for exams and assignments. And um, and he has access to Ritalin when he wants to use it. He hates it. It makes him feel yucky. He doesn't like taking it. But he does acknowledge that sometimes if he's got a heavy workload, he does need to take it and sit down and get through it. So
Hmm.
that diagnosis is absolutely great for that.
Oh my gosh.
So, but
Sorry. Sorry.
um,
My microphone's like going like slowly moving.
that's
It
okay.
might fall down at some
But
point, so don't be technical difficulties.
that's okay. But
Right.
what I wanted to also say is that because my middle one doesn't have a diagnosis, and he's a savant and he's so smart, although we know diagnosis is always good, we also worried about, does he need to have a diagnosis and do you need to disclose that, say, when he's trying to get into universities
Right.
or a job in the future? He's 16, so he's getting to that part where we're looking at and things like that. So, and then which also brings me to, through this whole journey, I've realized that I'm most definitely ADHD as well, self-diagnosed. Is it worth me at 48 to actually go and get diagnosed? You know, and I watch a lot of ADHD people on social media, on TikTok, on Facebook, etc., a lot of autistics and things like that. But most of the women that are late diagnosed ADHD, like my stage of life, when you're younger and you mask and you get through life, but then as life puts more and more demands on you,
Yeah.
you just can't cope with it anymore. And I've definitely felt you get married and then you live a life and you work and you pay bills, and then you have one child, then you have two children, then you have three children, then you find out that they're neurodiverse, and then you're fighting with the school and you're fighting with the council and you're fighting with your children, and everything actually becomes overwhelming. And then you hit menopause. And then it all just comes tumbling down. And I kind of felt that happened to me like a year and a half to 2 years ago, when we were in England and we were getting the diagnosis. And then I was fighting with everybody just to keep afloat. And I call it the terrible, horrible year. And my husband has shortened that to the Terry Ho. And I still feel now that I'm recovering from the Terry Ho, and I'm not there yet. I'm not recovered yet. And we moved to a new country during this time, which has been amazing. And my kids are getting more of the help that they need, because we moved into a situation where I told everybody what our needs are, and we are slowly getting those needs met. But I'm still trying to recover from when none of our needs were being met, and realizing that a lot of the fights I was having with my youngest was very triggering to me. And like now we've had a couple of rain days. I know some other countries have snow days, but here in the UAE, we have rain days. When it rains, the school gets cancelled, work gets cancelled, etc., etc. So then we went to a couple of days of home learning, and it brought back all the triggers of COVID. And then the 6 months that my son wasn't at school, and then the 6 months when he was school refusing, because then obviously after a whole week at home, Monday morning, he school refuses to go back to school. So it's bringing back all these triggers from my Terry Ho. So, all these things come come to fruition. And I'm wondering, should I go get diagnosed? What would be the benefit of that? Just to know for myself. I mean, I know myself.
Yeah.
And, so it's
Well,
all
they
these
maybe offer you
questions that we ask.
medication.
Medication. I could just take my son's foot.
Well, I mean, and I've seen that too. Like you're right. Like I watch Mel Robbins a lot, and she's very vocal about her neurodiverse tendencies, like ADHD and stuff. And I think she also got diagnosed late.
Late diagnosed. I mean, there's so
Late
many of us
diagnosis.
women.
Yeah, yeah. Like some of the stars are speaking out about it too. I can't remember, was it Julia Roberts, or I don't remember, but some of the stars were speaking out about like being diagnosed in their, because like you said, with the menopause, and then I think some of them were recognizing, how their coping skills that they used when they were younger weren't helping them anymore, and they were starting to, have more turn to alcohol more often, or just different things that were noticeably unhealthy choices, and not knowing why, like, why is this such a struggle for me now as opposed to when I was younger. But I think definitely hormones play a huge role in that.
Absolutely.
Um, but that's a good, I was actually thinking this is a good transition time to start talking about, do you tell your child? Because you were talking about your oldest not wanting to be diagnosed because he was aware of the stigma that it had brought on your youngest, and the challenges that came up for him in the school system around having that diagnosis. That was a unique, I mean, well, it would be interesting to hear from our listeners if anyone else has had experiences like that, where getting a diagnosis has actually been quite a challenging experience in the school system, whereas the school's kind of gone, hey, I'm not going to support you now anymore because these needs are too great for us. I'd be curious to know how many other people have struggled with that.
I think
Whereas,
more than you know in the international school system.
yeah, you're probably right. I mean, it's nice to think that, oh, if I get a diagnosis for my child, he'll have more help. But often, I think you're right. You don't get that help, even though you have the diagnosis. It can be a fight, like you said, to get the
But
help.
all works out in the end. And that's
Yes.
why I believe that when somebody, I know we're not doing schools now, but when somebody tells you who they are believe
Yeah.
them. And so
Yeah.
I 100% believe, and we'll discuss this more in detail when we do a school episode,
Yeah.
overshare on their struggles with the potential school. And if the
Yes.
school
Don't
says, yes,
sugarcoat it.
yes, we can accommodate, then they will get the support that they need. When you
Right.
start trying to hide it from the school,
Yeah.
you're going to struggle for the rest of the school time. And it may seem like, oh no, he's not getting into that school, but
Hmm.
you want them in an environment where they can feel good about themselves and they can thrive, rather
Yeah.
than feel like all my peers are doing okay and why am I the only one that's struggling.
Yeah. I actually had that experience when I moved here. I put them in a Catholic school that was a very academic focused, and everything was handwritten, and they were coming from a school where a lot was done electronically. And I was coming in thinking, oh, they'll be great because they did really well in their last school. And like by like 2 weeks in, they were just like, your child does not, meet criteria for this school. It was very apparent that they were very behind. We had come in late as well, which didn't help. But um and they were mad. They were like, why didn't you tell us they have these struggles? And I was like, well, they didn't have these, the struggles that you're talking about, they didn't have in their last school.
Yeah,
It's just the way your school is. But looking back on that time, I'm like, oh, I wished I had been more upfront, like, and really delved into like, how are they going to teach them math? How are they going to, what are they going to expect for them as far as handwriting goes? Every time you move, and this is one of the cool things about being an expat, is like you really get to learn how to advocate better for your child. And it was that school wasn't a fit. And so we had to take them out, and that's okay. We just kind of decided, and Dahlia, you're really excellent at this. You always say like, you know what, if it doesn't work, it's okay. You can just try something different. You don't have to feel like you have to make the right choice every single time. If the choice is not working out for you, there's lots of other options out there. And just having that mentality, right? That you're not stuck in something if it's not working for your child or you.
absolutely. I think one of the main things to be a successful expat is flexibility.
That's
And
right.
having moved 12 times to different countries, it's something that I've learned as an expat. Before I had kids, before the kids were school age, before the kids were diagnosed, before I knew that they were neurodiverse, we've had to change direction and pivot. I mean, one country we lived in for 6 months, and
Yeah.
that was a hectic year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
But
and then
worth it
I, and
because
I,
you got to live in Paris.
I know I got to live in Paris for 6 months. That part was awesome, but
Yeah.
the whole like moving,
Yeah.
unpacking, and then 2 months later packing up again
Yeah.
because our
Yeah.
furniture arrived, and 2 months later we moved.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I remember having the conversation that should we unpack or should we just keep the rental furniture and just keep all our stuff in storage? And we didn't know, so we thought, well, we don't know exactly when we're going to leave, so let's unpack.
Yeah. Let's get our stuff.
Yeah.
But so I was saying, I think we should talk just for a few minutes
Mhm.
about if how you tell your child, if you tell your child, what are some of the resources available out there to help you if you're feeling like you don't quite know how to explain things correctly to them. When we went in to get our diagnosis recently, the doctor specifically requested like that we don't bring the children in with us, which I was quite surprised about. I kind of thought for my oldest, who's 14, that is being diagnosed, because I had a 9-year-old as well, that the 14-year-old might benefit from speaking and hearing from a medical standpoint what the doctor had to say about some of the things he was gifted in, some of the things he was challenged in. Um, but the doctor just didn't want that. And so I asked him about it when I went in there, and I just said, hey, my son might have some questions for you. Like, could I make another appointment at a later date for him to come in and ask you? Because I had decided at his age, being 14, like he already knew that he was different. And it was, I think, when we did tell him that he had the diagnosis of autism, and he was actually really happy about it. He was relieved to
Lucky,
know
mate.
that this is why he feels different from other people.
Mhm.
This is why he's been struggling for so long. And to have that confirmation, even though I've always kind of said, you have some learning challenges, honey, and like this is probably why, and it runs in our family. But to have that like official diagnosis for his logical brain was really good for him. I didn't tell him about some of the other diagnoses, like the mood diagnosis. I did not mention to him about that. I didn't feel it would be a benefit. If we do explore medication for that later on down the line, we will have a talk at that point. But I didn't feel like that would actually benefit his life. In fact, I think it would just contribute to maybe negative feelings about
Anxiety.
himself that he's already working through. So,
Mhm.
so I didn't bring that part up.
And the
And
youngest?
also, pardon me.
The youngest, have you told him?
And no, we have not told our youngest yet. Like I said, we just received that official diagnosis last week,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the week. So we have not sat down and talked to him about it yet. He is a very so that, and this is where I wanted to go with this, is it's a personality thing too. So you have to take into account their age and stage, their mental capacity to be able to process that information. And then you have to take into account how they perceive themselves and the world around them. And I do think it's important that kids know what their diagnosis is personally. I don't know, you can share what you think, um, but for Milo, he's just heading towards the end of school year. He's feeling a little down on himself. His grades aren't the greatest. He's struggling. They're starting to do testing now during the next few weeks of school. And if I now present him with this diagnosis, I actually think that it will cause a bit of stress to him. So it's not a good time for me to tell him right now, but I will during the summertime when we have more one-on-one time and downtime and family time. I will definitely sit him down and with dad, and we will explain what the doctors found and some of the awesome things about it and some of the challenges about it that he already knows what the challenges are. I mean, kids already know how they're struggling and they
Yeah.
compare themselves to their peers all the time.
Yeah.
So, and I think it will be really good for him to know. And yeah. So we can talk more about that at the time. But with my other son, my oldest son, who's 24, he was a bit older when we received the diagnosis, and he was also very relieved to know that this was a neurological, thing. It was nothing that he was choosing to do, which many people had said, you're just naughty, you're just this, you just need to focus more, you
Bad
just need to.
parents.
But yeah, exactly. So he was relieved to know that it wasn't him doing anything wrong, that
Yeah.
was causing him to struggle in certain ways. Um, so yeah, I think it is really important to tell your children, yeah, but doing it at the right time in the right way,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
is the key, really. And
Yeah.
there's lots of resources out there. We'll go over those at the end of the podcast here in the next few minutes. We'll go over these resources that we found. But what about you, Dallia? Can you summarize kind of your
Yeah.
thoughts on how you
So
told
I
your
think
children?
with my oldest one with the ADHD diagnosis, I think we would have mentioned it. These are your struggles, and we had some tools, and we had educational psychologist working with him, giving him
Right.
tools, and we had like a menu on his desk at school, and his teacher would be like, okay, focus on the teacher now, and and things like that. And so I think he knew. I don't think we ever sat him down and said, this is your diagnosis. It was just, this is who you are, these are your struggles, and these are the tools we going to help you with. We tried medication with him and all sorts of medication. He hated them. He was about 10 or 11 at the time. He hated it. But then what was the winner was we actually took him out of the school that wasn't supporting him. We put him in a school and we got him a learning support assistant that sat with him. We got him OT at school, and he went from this like nervous, anxious child who hated school to actually excelling because he's extremely bright, and he was just in the environment where he was getting his needs met. So that was an amazing, amazing year. And unfortunately, that's only 1 year in that environment. And then we moved on to Paris and then to England. But that one base year set him up for, he had
Yeah.
learning support in the other schools, but it wasn't that we had to have somebody sitting with him. So we
Yeah.
gave him, we threw everything at him to support him, and it really, really sorted him out. I mean, he didn't just suddenly now not have ADHD. He struggles like everybody with ADHD, but he's so much better than he was because, you know, he was in the right environment. My middle one, you know, never ever problem because he's so academic, you know, and he does run into problems with teachers because they sometimes they misconstrue some of his behaviors as stubbornness or, you know, naughtiness. Or but the thing is, because, you know, autistic people have such a black and white, and because he's so smart, if a teacher will say something that's factually wrong, he'll challenge them on that. And that's very confronting to teachers, to be challenged by their students, especially like when he was little. When he was in grade 2, I think, so or grade 3 or grade 4, whatever, he would challenge his teacher because she would be teaching them maths, but then leave out some of the decimal points because they're not there yet, and he would say, "Oh no, but it's actually this, this, and this." So, you know, he does run into problems, you know, and when the teachers don't know how to deal with neurodiverse children, and
Yeah.
because we didn't have a diagnosis, we didn't know what it was. There were just lots of conflicting personalities. And so then when my youngest was diagnosed, we were like, now, how do we tell him? He's young. I think he was about 8 when he was diagnosed. And because he's so sociable and makes eye contact and very friendly, lovely kid, we never thought autism, you know, because if you don't
Yeah.
know, you think autism's something different. And then when the school was saying, oh, we need a diagnosis of what his learning difficulties are, then we went down the path. And very shocked when the doctor said to us, I think we should give him a ADOS, which is the autism diagnosis assessment. And we were shocked because I was like, he's not autistic, you know, but he is autistic. And we tried to like read him some books, and we spoke about it more that, oh, when we were doing the test, we realized that my middle one is very autistic. So without learning difficulties. So we kind of spoke about it as a family, as like, we're all neurodiverse. We kind of made it as normal as possible. And we're like, oldest one's got ADHD, middle one's is autistic. You know, we're all neurodiverse in this family, and we kind of just made it, it's our family, it's who we are. And I try and make it as normal in my
Yeah.
house as possible. And then we started reading him books about, I think the one's called, I'll show it to you now, but what's it called? The Superhero Brain. I got it on Amazon, explaining autism to empower kids. So we read him
Hmm.
books like that. The Superhero Brain, explaining
Yeah.
autism to empower kids by Crystal Land. And eventually we just kind of made it so normal that I don't actually remember the conversation where he said, you are autistic. We just made it normal as, this is our family. We're all neurodiverse. We've got autism, we've got ADHD, you know, these are the things. And kids know that they struggle. They know that they're different. And when you start explaining what it is, why they struggle, they happy with the diagnosis, I think.
Yeah. No, I agree. One of the books that I used when my son was younger, it's great for around like 10, I would say between 9 and 12 years old, is called Slow Down ADHD. And so it's a workbook that you kind of work through with your child, and it kind of goes through scenarios and how we can problem solve some of these situations that they're going to come up with socially and also like in school, and slowing down, slowing your body, some of the ways you can fidget toys and different things that you can use to kind of help your body concentrate and focus. So that's a great book, Slow Down ADHD, it's called. And then there's a spectrum of adventure stories about autism, children's stories about autism. That's on Amazon. I see here. And Nathan's Autism Spectrum Superpowers. is also looks really good. It's got 5 stars. So there's tons and tons of different books that you can get, maybe even from the library, to talk to your child about autism and what a gift it is. And like you said, I think normalizing it, like this is how our family is, and that's what we've actually already done as well. So I'll be curious to see when I do sit down and talk to my youngest about his diagnosis, if it will be surprising. I guess I'll share with you guys at that time to him, because we all talk about, our neurodiversity as just part of our family's oddness. And, whenever we meet another family who has like, your family, or we've met different families at church and stuff, and it's like, oh, we'll fit in really great with them because, they're neurodiverse too. And you can just tell, your families
We
click
find
together.
each other.
You find each other. You do
Find
find
each
each
other.
other, which is awesome because it just takes the pressure off, So I think it can be really, really, and socially it can be isolating, but if you flip it on to the other side and just say like, we're not going to fit in with that type of a family. Like we won't click with them, unfortunately, even though they're super nice people, but they'll probably be very annoyed by us
Yeah.
and
And
find the families like us,
and when
that
you
we have such a great time together.
and when you feel like you can be yourself, you
That's
know,
right. Yeah, and you
uh,
don't have to apologize for your child's uniqueness, right?
and you in
Yeah,
your own uniqueness, I
yeah,
find it's happened a couple of times since I've been an expat. So moving 12 times, it's probably happened about 3 times where I've just met someone, you being one
yeah,
of them, that it just felt easy from the beginning, and we just felt connected, and comfortable with each other enough to actually be ourselves, without having that mask. And a funny little story about masking is that today when we got on, we always get on the platform about 10 minutes before we start recording, and we talk
yeah.
about what we're going to talk about in the episode. And I was sitting here all quietly and talking all softly and stuff, and Krista said to me, you seem like you've got a bit of a heavy heart. Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just tired. But actually, the reality is, I have such high energy and I get so excitable that I always try and start off the podcast all calm and talking softly, because I know by the end I'm going to be talking like this and I'm running. So I wasn't actually heavy hearted. I was just masking because I'm
Yeah.
trying to talk like softer and more
What you think is
calm.
going to be socially acceptable.
Exactly. When I listen to podcasts and everybody sounds so good and they speak so well and so calm and their voices are so nice. And I'm thinking, this is what is expected when one is doing a podcast.
Yes. That's so
It's
funny.
crazy
And I
me.
was like, hey, no masking. We gotta be our real selves on here. It's okay
And
that we're
another
tired.
and another like quick story that there's actually books out there. I think I have never read them, but I know that they're out there, called All Cats Are Autistic. And there's another book called All Dogs Are ADHD. And it's quite funny because my whole life with the kids, I've always said, if I had to liken my children to animals, so doesn't everybody have this kind of conversation? What
Oh my goodness.
animal are
I
you
have a
or your
funny story
kids?
about this too, but I'll
So,
save it.
so I always say my oldest one is like a puppy. He's like a Labrador puppy. He's just like, he just wants to be your friend and he just wants to play. And even though he's still like that, even at 18, he wants to play.
Yeah.
And we're like, go find kids to play with on the playground. He goes, no, but that's illegal. I'll get into trouble because I'm 18.
Little 18-year-old.
I can't go find little kids to play with, but that's
Yes.
his dream, to like just hang out and play games.
Yeah.
And then my middle one is like, so I always thought my oldest one was like a puppy dog. So when I found the book, I was like, oh my God, it's hilarious. And then my middle one, I always say he's always like very calculating, and you ask him to do something, or his puppy dog brother asks him to do something. He's like, what's in it for me?
Yes.
Which is very cat-like, and I always used to tell my mother when she used to come and visit, I used to say, and I instinctively knew this before I knew about neurodiversity, is that when she comes into our lives, not to come to the children, the younger two, not to come to them and kiss them, hug them, and pick them up. and they will come to her when they're ready, because if she comes and tries to impose herself on them, then they won't have a relationship with her. They'll run away from her. And now I realize that that's a neurodiversity thing.
Yeah.
They need to feel safe and not be thrust upon any uh, family relative, like go hug or kiss so and so,
Yeah.
which is really, really frightening and scary for autistic
Yeah.
kids. So I always thought that my middle one behaved like a cat. So when I saw
Yeah.
these books, and I always used to say my youngest one's like a monkey, because he's just crazy. But now I realize
Everywhere.
he's probably autistic, ADHD. So he's got the mix of everything. But yeah, so it's interesting that's actually, there's books out there that are describing my children the way I describe them as animals.
That's so
Very
funny.
very confirming and
I think my son
affirming.
would love to read those. Those sounds so funny. I'm going to look those up. Anyways, we just want to thank our listeners for joining us today, and we hope that you guys have a wonderful week. Letting you know we're sending you all of our love. We thank you for joining us. Please, again, feel free to like, follow, subscribe, and send us messages. We will have our link of our email below if you have any questions on
Tell us, because
resources,
we want to
topics.
know. We want to
Yeah.
know what other people's experiences are like. Do you have an excellent book to help other people listening on the podcast or
Yeah.
following our page? Oh, a great thing is if you're on Facebook, which most of our generation is still on Facebook, to follow our page, Neuro Nomads, and then look at
Yeah.
who we follow, because we follow things like Neuro Wild and all these other neuro affirming people who are neurodiverse themselves and are able to give you their perspective. There
Yeah.
is a very good page a group to become a part of called Autism Inclusivity, which is run by autistic adults, so that you can then go as a neurotypical or neurodiverse parent. You can go in there and ask questions, say, hey, my 7-year-old has just got a diagnosis. What is the best way, or what are the best resources
Yes.
to tell him that he's
Yeah.
autistic? Or the school has said this and this and this. How can I get the school to understand that this is what autism comes from? And then they will answer you. Hundreds of people will answer you with such good ideas of how to deal with your autistic child, because they were that autistic child and they know how they would have liked to be told or treated or advocated for when they were
Yeah,
children.
it's wonderful. Awesome. Thanks,
Okay.
girl. I love
Love
you. And I guess I'll
you.
talk to you soon. Thanks,
Yes.
everybody,
Our
for
next
joining
therapy
us.
session.
Yeah. Sounds good. Bye.
All right. Bye.